Media coverage plays a critical role in shaping public awareness and perception of anti-Black hate crimes. However, mainstream media often fails to provide comprehensive and consistent reporting. Several factors contribute to this. Selective coverage, underreporting or delayed reporting. Pattern: hate crimes against Black people often receive delayed or minimal coverage compared to crimes against other groups. Example: the lynching of Ahmaud Arbery was largely ignored by mainstream media until social media forced national attention. Narrative skewing. When Black victims do receive coverage, the media digs into their past, like whether they had a criminal record, rather than focusing on the perpetrator's racist motivations. Framing hate crimes against Black people as isolated incidents. Example: hate crimes like the Buffalo mass shooting in 2022, where a white supremacist targeted Black shoppers, were covered briefly and then disappeared from the news cycle. Contrast: anti-Asian or anti-Semitic hate crimes tend to generate extended media coverage and government responses. Tactic used: avoiding systemic discussions, instead framing the shooter as mentally ill rather than acknowledging white supremacist ideology. False equivalence, both sides journalism. Pattern media creates false balance by covering Black hate crime victims alongside unrelated narratives about Black-on-Black crime. Example: after the Buffalo shooting, conservative outlets immediately shifted focus to crime in Black communities, ignoring how white supremacist ideology fueled the attack, how it skirts systemic issues. Instead of discussing how anti-Black racism is embedded in law enforcement and politics, media shifts to law and order discussions. The riots versus protest narrative. There's a pattern where the media criminalizes Black outrage when responding to hate crimes but humanizes white reactions. For example, after George Floyd's murder, protests were labeled as violent riots, while the January 6th insurrection was framed as political unrest. This tactic involves softening language for white violence while using aggressive descriptions for Black resistance. Ignoring historical context. The media often reports Black hate crimes as if they happen in a vacuum, never linking them to systemic racism, redlining, Jim Crow, or white supremacy. For instance, when police kill Black people, the media avoids linking it to historical patterns of racialized policing, such as slave patrols, Jim Crow laws, and mass incarceration. Omitting historical context makes it easier to paint these incidents as random, rather than part of a system. How to challenge media bias around Black hate crimes. First, demand consistency. Call out how the media frames white supremacist violence differently from other hate crimes. Next, compare coverage. Show how Black victims receive less sympathy than white victims of similar crimes. Also, expose the language tricks. Highlight media softening language for white attackers, while criminalizing Black victims. Push for systemic discussions. Shift the conversation from isolated crimes to policy failures that allow anti-Black hate crimes to persist. Finally, support alternative media independent outlets like The Griot, Blavity, Black Power Media, and ProPublica cover systemic issues without corporate filters. Many media networks are owned by conglomerates that have vested interest in maintaining the status quo. Discussions on systemic racism may be limited to avoid alienating advertisers or political affiliations. Sensationalism versus systemic issues. Mainstream media prioritizes high-engagement stories. High-profile cases receive attention, but broader systemic causes are often ignored. Gatekeeping and media bias. Newsrooms historically lack diversity, affecting how racial violence is reported. Black communities' voices are often not centered in reporting. Framing and language choices. Terms like racially charged downplay the severity of hate crimes. Neutralized language obscures the accountability of perpetrators. Social media as a counterbalance. Platforms like Twitter and TikTok allow grassroots movements to expose injustices. Be careful, as social media also spreads misinformation and extremist propaganda.